There are 3 reasons why I decided to make a podcast about people who have gone through the foster care system as children. First of all, the people who have gone through the system do not have the same advantages as those who have not gone through the system. It takes a lot of resources to raise a child. I know because I have 2 myself now. It takes parents, money, unconditional love, and a village or a community. These are all resources. And the goal of the foster care system is to provide those resources to foster care youth, to provide these basics. Ideally, a foster child in the system will have loving parents who will unconditionally accept them until they reach adulthood and support them as young adults. Fortunately, there are a lot of these happy endings. However, while that situation is the ideal situation and the whole goal of the foster care system, there are still a whole lot of kids in the system who jump from home to home and from school to school. And while they have resources, those resources are not consistent. And this is a clear, undeniable disadvantage, not only for the child, but the society. Children are society's richest resource. So one of the goals of this podcast is that I want foster kid alumni to appreciate their past. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. So I am a former foster kid. I was in foster care from the ages of 10 to 17. And in my mid-30s, I thought that I had made a clean break. And I didn't realize now, where did I realize now? Now I am 1 year away from being 50. What I realize is that in my old age, you get this sort of perspective. And instead of denying my past, I am now accepting it. And what I realize is that all of our childhoods, not just foster care kids, but all of our childhoods have this ripple effect that goes into adulthood. And those ripples can become waves that will overwhelm you if you let them. And in your 20s, those waves are quite large. And if you work on them, if you don't like those waves and you work on them, you get therapy or you just have some self-realization, you work on yourself, those waves become ripples and they become smaller and smaller. The key takeaway, though, is that they never quite go away. So don't think that they will magically disappear. Let me tell you a story to exemplify my point. So I was talking to a lady from Guinea, which is a small country on the west coast of Africa. And where there is still a lot of gender inequality and human rights issues, she found a way to circumvent her circumstances. She wanted to study, and while she wasn't able to study what was in her heart, she found a way to take advantages of the resources that were available to her. And she moved and educated herself. And while what she's doing now wasn't her ideal future self or her younger self, she has come pretty close, and I'm actually quite proud of her. She managed to access education despite her circumstance. And in my wanting to relate to her, of course, she's only known me for the last year. She has no clue I was in the foster care system. Honestly, I don't even know if she would care. But I told her to relate to her that when I was a kid, I wanted to study biology and work with animals to some capacity. And what I ended up doing was I got a bachelor's degree in anthropology with some focus on primatology. And then I went to nursing school and I became a registered nurse. And while that's not my dream of working in the savannah or being a veterinarian, working with animals, it is as close as I could get to my dream. So I was trying to relate to her, trying to navigate my circumstances. And she told me, yeah, but you probably had a lot more opportunities than I had. And you know what? She's probably right. That is probably true. But I didn't know where to go with the conversation. For one, there wasn't enough time. Maybe it wasn't really appropriate. But I also didn't want her to judge. But I think here lies the crux of the issue. Foster care youth were not raised by their families. They were raised by people not related to them, and these people are licensed by the state. And everything that you receive, all the resources that you receive as a foster kid, is funded by the state. And there's a stigma there. And I have really tried to think about where the stigma comes from, because these are kids. Why are they being stigmatized? And I think it boils down to the fact that foster kids are wards of the court, and people who are in jail or who are imprisoned are wards of the state. And very often the public conflates those two subsets, meaning you were plucked out of society and placed in a contained environment. You are no longer in a normal way that society expects an individual to be in. Somebody must have done something wrong to be put in this unnatural situation. So you have these adults who were former foster youth walking around trying to blend in, trying to fit in, trying to make the most out of the moving resources they had as kids. They have internalized the impact of this stigma. There were a few times when I was a foster care kid and I went to school and it got leaked out that I was in foster care. And kids would come up to me and ask this question, "What did you do?" And that was the question when they found out. And I honestly don't remember how I responded, but I do remember starting to develop this feeling of it is me versus them. There was this separation between my world and the rest of the world. The other side of the stigma is we don't want to incite pity. We don't want to be felt sorry for. We want our history to be regarded with dignity. So what happens is, because of these two negative perceptions of foster youth, either you did something wrong or you were piteous, as an adult, we choose to be silent about our past to avoid judgment. So one of the goals of this podcast is to disintegrate, to break down this stigma of what it is to be a foster kid and what it is to have been a foster kid. Foster kids have worked damn hard to keep playing in fields that are not level for them, and their disadvantages do not magically disappear when they leave the system. The other goal of this podcast is we adults, we have stories. Some of us keep our stories to ourselves, and some of us want to tell the world our stories. Storytelling has a special purpose, and that purpose is connection. And I want those who have gone through the system to finally have a chance to summarize their experience and know that there are listening ears. And then there are some people who don't know about the foster care system, or they know very little about it. Our stories will bring awareness. The third goal is our stories can be put to good use, not only for the sake of storytelling, but also for older kids in the foster care system about to age out. Maybe they don't see a future for themselves. Maybe they can't imagine their future because they're too deep in the waters and in survival mode. They are too young. They don't have the full perspective that an adult has. If in your 20s, those waves are large waves, can you imagine how high those waves are as a teenager or a young adult? But because they are so young, they're impressionable. Let's impress upon them in a positive way. Hey, when I was 15, 16, 17 years old and a podcast existed where people talked about their experiences, number one, I would feel a lot less alone, but also realizing that once I leave the system, I have a place in society. I have a right to be educated. I have a right to play on an equal playing field, and that I can contribute. I am a part of something bigger than myself, and that is absolutely nothing to be ashamed of. That is something to be proud of. You are surviving. Let's look at it this way. I am reading this book right now. It's called The Forgotten Soldier by Guy Saya. It's a French name. I think it's Guy Saya. Anyway, it's about his experience in World War II as a 17-year-old, and he went into combat. And when he joined civilian life, he not only told his story or his stories, he wrote a book. Why can't we afford foster kids that same permission to share our stories and to let them know that they are doing something worthy? You are helping to undo mistakes that you didn't make, with the greater goal that your life will serve a purpose beyond your circumstance. Okay, so there will be other goals as this podcast progresses, but those are the three main goals: to destigmatize what it is to be a foster care youth, to reach out to current foster kids about to age out of the system, and to share our stories and bring awareness. As the podcast progresses, perhaps those goals will be fine-tuned. Maybe there will be some added, but for now, those are the goals. If you want to reach out, I have made a Facebook page. I will link to it in the comments below. For now, it's private, but I will add you. Comments are on below for an open, civilized discussion. Stay tuned. We appreciate your listening ears.